Now, in order to assert this, first of all, we need to understand the very first words of this story. V'tadaber Miriam v'Aaron b'Moshe. Miriam and Aaron spoke of Moshe, about Moshe. That's what it seems to say. If it wanted to say that they spoke to him, it would have said El Moshe, that they spoke to him. But it says b'Moshe. However, Shadal and many other commentaries say that no, it means that they spoke to Moshe. How do we know that they spoke to him? Because when God wanted to admonish the two gossipers and Moshe, and in the presence of Moshe, he said, "Tu'u shlosh-tachem el ohel moed." The three of you should come out. The three of them came out, presumably from the same place. Presumably they were all in the same place. When Miriam and Aaron spoke, they were not gossiping behind his back. They were admonishing him to his face. They were speaking about his marital life and how he should conduct himself right in front of him. Secondly, if we look in the Sifri, the great Midrash, which spans both Bamidbar and Devarim, there we say that, remember that Miriam was not as bad as you think. She was not trying to speak against him. She was trying to speak in his praise. That she had such a wonderful, pretty wife, a wife of good deeds. They only wanted him to be with his wife, to have more children. He had 2 children, he should have more. That's what she wanted. She wanted good things. So we certainly should be careful about gossip, because sometimes we speak against others and we don't mean the good and the righteous for the one we're speaking against. But the main thing I want to draw out of the Sifri is that they recognize that she was speaking as an admonisher. Someone who said, there's an important mitzvah in the Torah to have children, and you're apparently staying away from your wife. That's what we overhear. That's not right. They give tochacha, they give rebuke to this mighty and holy brother. But that's their role, particularly Miriam. She's the leader because she's the prophetess. That's her job. Maybe a job she doesn't get to exercise very often. But that's her job, to admonish the leader or the king. Rabbi Yosef Bechor Shor, a wonderful commentator who is very often quoted by the Chizkuni, perhaps more well-known, Spanish commentator, one of the Balei Tosfot, one of the rabbis in the Tosfot period. He says that they thought that perhaps he was a haughty person. You never know who's haughty, who's not haughty. Maybe he was being haughty because he married a woman from outside the community. Perhaps he thought he was so important, like perhaps the King Solomon, who married so many wives from other nations and other kingdoms. So he married a queen, the queen of Midian, of Cush, maybe perhaps of Ethiopian queen. And they said, we're also important. We're Kohanim, and we're priests, we're prophets. And we didn't marry someone from outside of the Jewish people. Why did you marry someone from outside? Do you think you're better than others? It's a form of admonishment. God comes and says, no, Aish Moshe Nav Meod, he's very modest, and you're not admonishing him properly. But that was what they had in mind, to say that you should marry someone from within the community. Another lesser-known commentator, Yosef Ibn Kaspi, a very controversial figure, but nonetheless an interesting commentator, lived a Sephardic Jew from the earlier period. He says that as follows. Yosef Ibn Kaspi says, "Dai b'isha achat." The simple meaning of the text is that he had a wife, Tzipora, and then he seemed to have taken another wife, a Cushite wife, an additional wife, not from Midian, but from Cush, Ethiopia, Africa, somewhere else. So he says, you can have more than one wife, but why would someone have more than one wife? You don't need more than one. One wife is sufficient. You should remain with her. So that was the admonishment, according to the Ibn Kaspi. The Tzror Hamor, we mentioned earlier, Rabbi Avraham Sibag of the Spanish exile, He takes another approach. He says that ulai piresh meisha derech gava, assuming the Midrashic and Rashi approach, that in fact he separated himself from his wife. Why did you separate yourself from your wife? Do you think you're some kind of a high priest who can't be with human beings, with others, have a marital life? Is this some form of gava? Do you think you're higher than others? I think we need to speak to our brother. We need to speak to him about this. We have regular marital lives, so should he. The Or HaChaim says it explicitly. If you think it's strange that Miriam would rebuke her brother, after all, he's Moshe Rabbeinu. Don't forget. To Miriam, it's a younger brother. And to Miriam, she's the prophetess. That's the role of the prophet. Listen to the words of the Or HaChaim, Reb Chaim ben Attar, the holy Or HaChaim HaKadosh. He said, Ulai shedibru v'fanav shel Moshe. I agree that she spoke right at Moshe, right in front of him. Hadat maskem v'pazet. It seems what it seems to be. Ki ma yo'ilu daber lo tov b'neihem levein atzmam. What's the point of just gossiping by themselves? You think they were so low to just gossip by themselves for no point? Ela amru divrehim derech tochacha v'hu shomea milatam. They said their words as a way of rebuke. It was a way of rebuke. Chaim ben Attar affirms this hypothesis which we're expounding upon. That in fact, Miriam, and perhaps to a lesser degree Aaron, are trying to rebuke their brother. They feel that somehow, one of the myriad of ways, he has gone astray. They need to lead him back to the proper path. And with that, he will correct his course, continue to be the great Moshe Rabbeinu. In fact, if we ask, why is this found in this particular section of the Parsha? Now we can give a new answer. As we see Moshe speaking to God in questionable ways, he says, have I given birth to these people? How can I take this burden, this masa? Masa is also a prophecy. I can't handle all this prophecy, the burden of prophecy. When the prophetess, Miriam, sees that Moshe is having trouble in his role as prophet, she says, it's time for me to step forward and me to do something about this. When Moshe is complaining and he says, Mi'ayin li basar, where are we going to get all this meat from? You expect me to feed all these people with basar, with meat. How am I going to do it? Miriam realizes she needs to step forward as a prophetess. So there's something that's lacking in Moshe's prophecy at this time. He needs help. Even the Ibn Ezra says, perhaps he had separated from her because she was not yafa, because she was not beautiful, and they said, that's not right. Just because she's not beautiful, you should take her back. Or in the words of the Hemek Davar, the Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, the Nitziv, which lived not so long ago, he says that he found this in the Paneach Raza, another book. Ulai piresh biglal giur. Maybe he separated himself from this wife because he said to himself, well, you know, she's a convert, she's a really Midianite woman, and it's true that she adopted Judaism, but maybe it's not worthy of the great prophet to be with this woman who converted. And says the Hemek Davar, these holy people, Miriam and Aaron, said, no, that's not a proper attitude. How can you be mitza'erota? How can you cause such sorrow to her? She's complaining, she's moaning and whining about her lot in life, that she has no husband of sorts. It's not right, they said. They were admonishing him from an interpersonal point of view. You took this wife, you took her, whether she was beautiful, she wasn't. You took her whether she was Jewish or not Jewish. She did convert, she did not trick you, she converted wholeheartedly. It's not proper, it's not right to stay away from her. You need to get back together. Indeed, the Hemek Davar also believes that somehow they were trying to admonish him and tell him the proper way to conduct himself.